Hi, and welcome to the When Women Fly podcast. Each episode, I have poignant conversations with women who fly, run, surf, ski, climb, or otherwise soar, and possess a passion for life that is infectious. These are honest and insightful conversations about dreams and reinvention, often in the face of uncertainty, doubt, or other impediments. We talk about busting paradigms, grit, working hard, and playing hard, all while building a community around the empowering metaphor of flight. I am your host, Sylvia Winter, a pilot, runner, mother, skier, list maker, and apparently podcaster. I believe that when we share our stories, own our fears, and dismantle our perceived limitations, the possibilities are boundless. Whether you're pursuing your passion or simply love the idea of possibility and wonder, this podcast is for you. Thank you so much for joining me today. Let's get started. My guest today is Judy Kasiama, founder of Color the Trails, based in Vancouver, BC. Her work entails creating safe space for Black, Indigenous, and people of color to recreate in the outdoors by organizing events and advocating for more diversity and inclusion through better representation in media and storytelling. She has gotten the attention of a pretty white-dominated industry, outdoor and wilderness sport, adventure, and recreation. Through adventure and travel, she highlights her experience as a Black woman that skis, hikes, camps, climbs, and explores. A former refugee of the Democratic Republic of Congo, she was raised in South Africa, Australia, United States, and now lives in Canada. For many in the outdoor and aviation communities, 2020 has exposed the amount of work that needs to be done in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Some organizations and individuals have been working to foster a more diverse participation and representation in outdoor-related media and storytelling, and so much more needs to be carried out and carried on. This is not a box to be checked, but rather an approach and a mindset towards curiosity, a dialogue about differences, and a commitment to accountability. Accountability for racial injustices and historic legacies that undermine the potential of individuals and groups. Where do we go from here? There are so many takeaways from this conversation with Judy. I believe that what she is doing, the approach she is taking, can be scaled and remodeled in countless other fields that lack diverse representation and could use a good dose of dismantling assumptions and stereotypes, as well as an overhaul in industry marketing priorities and a greater awareness of access as a key component to forming new narratives. So enjoy my conversation with Judy Kasiama. We talk about intersectionality, confidence, community, following your intuition, and so much more. Judy, I'm so excited to connect with you today. Can we start with a brief introduction?
Yes. Thank you so much for having me at 5:30 a.m. this morning.
Your time.
Yeah, Vancouver time. Pacific. Yeah. So my name is Judy Kasiama. I'm the founder of Color the Trails, based out here in Vancouver, BC, Canada. And basically, what Color the Trail is an organization that works on including Black, Indigenous, and people of color gain access and confidence in the outdoors. So we organize a lot of events, intro events in terms such as like intro to hiking, intro to skiing, all these different things to really just kind of support more individuals to access nature, but also feel safe in nature with all the skills that we provide.
I'm so excited to talk to you more about that. Can we perhaps start with your early influences? You have a really interesting background, and I'd love to talk a little bit about how you grew up and what inspired you as a young girl.
Yeah, I was born in Democratic Republic of Congo. After the Rwandan genocide, so in 94, there was like a civil war that broke into the Congo and the country became very unstable. So then we moved to South Africa. After South Africa, we moved to Australia. After Australia, we moved to the United States and was there for 10 years before immigrating to Canada 10 years ago. And yeah, that was pretty much like my childhood, traveling a lot, seeing the world in a very different perspective, which I'm very grateful for because I think living all those experiences, through the war, immigrating from, South Africa to Australia to the US has really gave me a really unique perspective of the world, which I think a lot of people don't always have. And I'm very fortunate for that.
And a lot of skills, I would think, as a young child for adapting and reading your environment.
Yeah, I'm very much aware of the space I am in. I'm very much self-aware as well. That's one thing moving around really make you kind of forces upon you. I would say it's like you're very self-aware because you're constantly in different schools, meeting new different friends. So for me, I love traveling. I love just going to new places. I'm not intimidated by it, which I think it's a important skill to have. Not everybody has the skills. I can go anywhere and be able to make friends, be able to connect to the community. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we were moving along so much. It really did allow me to build that confidence.
Mhm. It was normal for you to be in new environments and make the most of it. And what role did the outdoors play in different stages of your younger years?
Growing up in the Congo, we had a lot of access to nature. I lived with my grandmother in my family hometown or village called Kikwiti, which is south of Kinshasa, the capital. And just like as a kid, you have a lot of free reign into doing spending times in the outdoor. There was no TV growing up. So most of my time really until just like, whether it's just like swimming in rivers or climbing a mango tree to get mango. That was like pretty much my childhood. And I found that after the war and as we moved from Congo to South Africa and Australia, there was almost like a disconnect with nature just because we moved into a more urban setting. And Australia was actually fairly good because it was parks and just kind of in school, because Australia, everything can kill you. So there was a lot of educational components about all the wildlife, you can possibly come across. So there was kind of that. But as soon as we moved from Australia to the US, I don't think there was much, I would say, not interest, but there's just no access to the outdoors for my family at that time due to the circumstances that we were in. It wasn't. And I grew up, majority of it 7 years. I was in the Boston area. So yeah, just like, snow, but then I never really thought of snow as anything other than just like a complete annoyance. I didn't see it as enjoyable. So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The Boston greater Boston area, it's hard to enjoy it in that area. And your family was in Toronto, and you went to Vancouver for your studies. Tell us about your approach to your studies in college, and it's an extension of your multicultural interest and curiosity.
yeah, after we immigrated to Canada in 2010, I stayed in Toronto, Hamilton area for 2 years with my family. I decided to move out here to BC because the weather was way milder than I would say Toronto. Toronto is really cold. So I was like, I want to find somewhere where the weather is not so cold and I don't have to deal with snow at all. And that's in Vancouver. So I moved out here to study international studies, history, and gender studies. And yeah, all these, I think these components played a huge role in terms of what I'm advocating now because with my discipline, there's no really clear direction in terms of which way you can go. It's not like I was studying nursing and I'm going to become a nurse with international development or international studies. You're taking a lot of different courses and basically building from that. And having a history background was also a really important component because with my work, it helps me really understand why is there a lot of people of color and not in the outdoors. Like what has been like historically, what prevented Black people to be in the outdoors. If we look back, we can look at the history of slavery, all these bad things that happens in the woods so that Black individual, Black communities don't feel safe because of the long history of what has happened in the woods. So now with my work, it's just kind of trying to break that and bring back healing into the community in terms of we do have access to the outdoors and we have a right into that space because for a long time a lot of people didn't think that was something that they can do or learn or be part of.
Mhm. It sounds like your university experience gave you tools to really think about a term that you've used before, intersectionality, and I'd love you can speak more eloquently to that than I can, but I that's I think what you're saying. I'd love to hear more thoughts about that specifically because I think that's a really important topic.
Yeah. Intersectionality is basically how one's identity crosses in different ways. So, as a Black woman, what is my lived experience? And a lot of that entails being a Black, being a woman, and then how the world treats me based on those criteria. So, how my life intersects. And I think a lot of times, whether it's me as a Black person, coming from an immigrant family, the fact that I like to sleep in a tent, they never understands why. Like, for us, my mom, my family always like, we left hardship in Africa to come here, and you're choosing to go outside to sleep in a tent without a bathroom.
You're reverting back to, yeah, what we love.
Yeah, and for me, I think it's like that's why intersectionality comes into play, because it's like my identity is it's so complex, and I can't be tied into just like one norm. And that's where it comes with the outdoors. It's like, how are we creating spaces where the LGBTQ plus community can come and go hiking and do all these things in the outdoors and feel safe about it? And why is things that, they might not feel safe? As a woman, how do I hike and be safe? So that we have to look at that intersectional identity of an individual before we can claim that the outdoor is accessible to all, when in reality, it isn't, right? There's a lot of barriers for a lot of different people. And we first have to understand that identity and then work towards how we can create that inclusive space and welcome them into a space that sadly for a long time has never welcomed them.
Yeah, I think it's just so important to have a language to start to talk about some of the challenges and not just sort of simplify it. And I think that's what, to me, when I've been exposed to the topic of intersectionality and really understand peeling back the onion and the importance of doing that for every individual and avoiding the labels and name calling, it really does open up so much in our minds and our hearts. And obviously, what you're doing is, gosh, it's such a model for that. After university, you worked for a nonprofit, and you've shared with me a bit about that prior work and some of the things that you learned, some of the challenges you have, but in the end, it seemed to feed your personal determination to address some of the racial inequities and issues in new ways. Can you speak a little bit to that experience?
Yeah. So after university, I managed a coffee shop, and then I got this opportunity to work with a private charity out here that does sustainable development, predominantly in East Africa. So the Great Lakes region, that's looking at Tanzania, Uganda, Burundi, DR Congo, and a few other smaller countries. And the whole purpose of it was to create sustainable villages, sustainable communities, because oftentimes communities living in a small rural area would move people move from rural area into the major city, where they're at higher risk in terms of unemployment, joblessness, and all that. So there's a huge risk. So the best way to support communities is to be able to build their villages into what is sustainable, where there's jobs, there's economic opportunities to kind of stop that huge flow from villages into the city. And having that background and also being in that region, I kind of understood what needed to be done. And working with this nonprofit, it was a very difficult place because I have a degree in this area, but when I would present solutions, I was being shut down a lot. And as a Black woman working predominantly in a white organization, we began to clash very easily. There was like a honeymoon phase where they were super excited to have me. But then when I was like ready to get down to work and hold those in position of power accountable, because we're getting private money and wanting to do things in Africa, but we weren't really doing what we're supposed to do. And on top of that, the system where they're operating is Intel providing macro loans to communities to start like small farm, small business, and all that. But in a country where a monthly income is, let's say, $200 or $300 a month, USD, we were giving people, let's say, around, anywhere between $1,500 to $5,000 without any proper training in terms of how to use that money in a way that is sustainable and to grow the business. So for me personally, I thought the best way to start is give somebody a small amount of money for the first couple of months, help the business kind of run, and then begin to build to a point where maybe in the next 5 years we can give them X amount. And I was making this suggestion, trying to change that, and I got pushed out. I got put in a position where I had to work wasn't a safe place for me to be. Anything I said or any suggested I was putting up was constantly being cut down. And they basically, forced me out. And it's really sad because, like, even now, I get a lot of the leaders that I was working with continuously messaging me, wanting to work with me, and just saying, like, things are a mess right now because they're not really doing anything. They're not moving forward. It's not really sustainable. And it became almost like a white savior aspect of the organization. And that just kind of made me really angry. And that's why I'm glad that it kind of pushed me to a point where I had to quit. And I just poured that energy into Color the Trails in terms of how do I run Color the Trails. And I personally don't want to run it as a nonprofit because a nonprofit is a lot of work to maintain, and it just takes so much of my energy. And just coming from the nonprofit background, I didn't want to be part of that. So the way I'm running Color the Trail is a business, but it's almost like a social enterprise in a way where it's very community based. We work with a lot of different brands to subsidize outdoor activities. So if we're doing intro to kayaking course, we have a brand who subsidizes it so that we're also encouraging communities to also pay a little bit so that we can continue this program. And we run it very much like a nonprofit, just without the nonprofit title, I would say. And for me, I think that's a very creative way because I feel like society or the capitalist system we live in, it's either or, you have to, like, make a lot of money, or you have to be so poor like a nonprofit and just like get money free. And for me, that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to do it in a way that is sustainable, that is giving back into the community, that is community led. It is a difficult position to be in because a lot of people don't know how to work with me. A lot of brands, a lot of organizations don't know how to work with me. But I think a lot of them are also beginning to catch up and recognizing that even the nonprofit model is a very elitist model, and it's not fair, and it's not accessible for a lot of BIPoC visionaries who are coming into this space and wanting to start something new. And having that requirement of being a nonprofit, it's actually kind of like pushing people away or discouraging people because it's just like a lot of process. You need a lot of lawyers involved. You need all these things, which many of us don't have. And, we're studying it because we're passionate. We're studying it because we want to see a change, and we're doing everything we can to build our community and in a way that is supportive, and it's community led, and it's community based. So,
Mhm. It's a really creative solution and sort of a third road instead of, right, the either really capitalist driven or nonprofit. It's sort of both and sort of unapologetically, and I really appreciate that challenge and also what drove that, and I think it's really exciting. I'm really excited about the model of what you're doing and how it can be scaled. I would actually love to take a little bit of a step back with Color the Trails, though, because gosh, so you started with sort of creating these moments with Color the Trails, maybe not even knowing what it was going to become, and now it's become a movement, really, sort of moment to momentum. And, you personally have such a contagious joy for the outdoors and are leveraging that to bring people of variety of backgrounds out in the wilderness and out and doing these sports. So let's just talk a little bit about how it really began.
yeah, it began, I think, one of the reason I moved to BC was I think in 2010 when there was the Winter Olympics that was happening in Vancouver. That was one thing that drew me to Vancouver. It was just like mountains, ocean, and I was like, oh, I want to go there. And then I see all these sports. I was like, I want to do that. But to be honest, I didn't know what that was. I just knew that I wanted to do something similar, but I didn't know how to even begin. So in my undergrad, I did a few kind of outdoorsy things, but the thing is, you kind of need another barrier that people don't realize. Having access to a car makes your access to the outdoor a lot easier versus depending on people to give you a ride or trying to figure it out. And Vancouver is actually really good because there's a lot of outdoor groups that you can join, and somebody's always going somewhere. So you can have that. And for me, after I graduated, I bought myself a car, very cheap car, and it got me to where I needed to go. And the more hikes I was doing a lot of solo hikes. But then when friends would visit, I'll go on hikes with them because I was like, hiking, there's just something about being in nature that causes all of us to bond faster. The first 5 minutes, yes, we're talking about the weather, very, minimal thing. But then 30 minutes or 40 minutes into a hike, we go into really deep conversation. And I find like that's like a really great way of creating bond and as well as friendship. So I would take a lot of friends out who were visiting me from other the states or abroad. I would take them on hikes. At that time, I was working at a coffee shop. So like if I met somebody at a coffee shop who's like new, because there's always a lot of people traveling, I'll be like, yeah, let's go on a hike. I'll show you a little bit of the hikes around here, and we'll go on a hike. And just through that, I began to really kind of think a lot more because Vancouver, the Black population here is about 1% of the total population. So there's a very small percentage of us here. And we're all very much everywhere in like, Vancouver in the city or outside the city. But we do have a very active Facebook group. So I just posted in that, Black Facebook group and just be like, hey, I love going hiking. Is anybody in the community be interested? And so many people express interest. And then I was like, okay, this is a good way to connect with my community and know who's out there and also make new friends. Yeah, so I organized our first hike was more like a after work, like a very easy afternoon hike. Went, met amazing people. And then from there I was like started visioning like how to make this as a group. And I just kind of started off as a brand before we called it the trails. I called it Black People Hike Vancouver. And then I began to organize that group and then just like, being very persistent. There's this over here in the Pacific Northwest, oftentimes people are very flaky. So everybody's always flaky. Like, people, you'll put an event out 2 weeks in advance. People say yes, but the day off, people don't want to, or it's raining. So that's just how it is here. So, and everything, everybody does. Everybody, if you read Pacific Northwest, Vancouver, people are flaky. But just being consistent, holding a hike once or twice a month, starting easy and just encouraging people because it's very intimidating when I post like, the trail information, like the difficulty, how many kilometers we're hiking. People are so intimidated by it. They're just like, oh, I can't do that. I need to go to the gym first and become like very physically active before I can like do a hike like that. And I just kept telling people, I was like, no, just come. We're going to go at an easy pace and you definitely can do it. And just kind of encouraging. And the more I did that, the more people began to express interest. And about a year ago, I rebranded as Color the Trails just to create that more space. And also, a lot of people of color were also reaching out, wondering if they can come to this space. I was just like, this is an inclusive space for everybody. And yeah, and just like that's where my love of Color the Trails kind of was birthed. It's just more of creating this space where people can come and hike and or do whatever activity and then form a friendship. And that's what I've really seen in the past, I would say 4 years, is connecting people that would never have connected because like they're different friend group or live different places, and then all of a sudden now they're really good friends that they hang out outside of Color the Trails. And for me, that's what I just want to do. I just want to connect people and just be like, we all enjoy nature. So sometimes when we enjoy doing something, we think we're the only one and nobody else enjoys this. So when you come across other individuals who are passionate about the same thing as you, in this case, being in the outdoors, learning all these different things, it just makes the experience even all that amazing. And then you begin to see that joy, but you also begin to see how people begin to bring their friends and being like, no, come, let's go a hike. Or, if they're hanging out with their friends, they're going away for like, a little long weekend getaway, they try to get their group of friends to also go on a little hike. And then for me, that's what I want. It's just like, it just takes one person to begin to make that change. And I'm just really glad to be privileged to be in this space to kind of allow people to know that, hey, it's cool to be in the outdoors and you don't, this space belongs to you. And then them taking that back with their family, with their friends, and then doing it on their own or coming in to Color the Trails events and doing it as well.
It's really neat how momentum has no boundary, and I think it's really inspiring what you're doing. Was there a moment when you felt like, "Oh my gosh, I can do what I love, connecting people, being out in the outdoors, and make it your job and your work?"
To be honest, I didn't really think I can make it a job or my work. I kind of fell into this position because after I quit my job in August 2019 with that private charity, I took some time off. Like I did apply for a few jobs and I got there, but just something inside was just like, if I do 9 to 5, I'm not going to be able to grow Color the Trails into what it can be. Like I knew visionary wise, like it can be something, but I didn't know I can make money out of it because at that time, when I was reaching out to a lot of brands about diversity and equity in the outdoors, I was getting a lot of doors shut in my face. Like people were not wanting to have that conversation. People didn't have budget for that conversation. A lot of brands are just like, they're just kind of like, yeah, but they're not really follow through. So for me it was very difficult. But I just again perseverance. I just persisted. I was like, okay, brands don't want to support me, that's fine. I'll just use whatever money I have to be able to put on a few events. I'll just cover gas money on my own. All those different things. It was just like me taking that sacrifice because I just knew that it provided people an opportunity to come together to do something and do something fun. And it's so good for mental health, especially Vancouver, where 6 months of the year, sometimes we don't see the sun because it rains a lot here. We're like in a rainforest kind of weather. So just like letting people know that, hey, if it's raining here or it's cloudy in the city, if we just go up and snowshoe in a mountain, there's sun. And people are like, what? I didn't know that. And like, we'll go and have a beautiful day and then look into the valley. We just see clouds, we're above clouds. And then people are just like not recognizing it's like, oh, like, we don't have to go the entire winter without seeing the sun. There's activities that we can do that makes a winter shorter, not too long, because once you involve in the winter activities, winter flies by so fast. And I was dreading winter when I was first moved out here just because it was long, cold, and rainy. So yeah, that momentum and just that opportunity really helped. And it wasn't until this past summer, because of the Black Lives Matter movement out of the US, and people then beginning to recognize, and also us being homebound because of COVID, that hey, there is like an issue. There is a lack of accessibility when we, especially in the outdoor industry, because it took them a long time to catch up. And now I'm working with a lot of the brands that did say no. A lot of them came back and be like, okay, figure this out. And I think in some ways it was just me planting my seed and just letting them know that hey, I'm here. And once they've kind of like recognized and came to a point that like, oh yeah, this is an issue, at least they had my contact. And it wasn't something that I created out of nowhere or last minute. No, it was something that I was already, a lot of them knew who I was, especially in Vancouver. But just yeah, I guess the timing matters.
I'm really feeling like you nailed the timing. It might not have seemed like that in 2019 after, you let go of that job with the nonprofit and, you were wondering and not necessarily feeling like you were an entrepreneur, but that you were called to do this really, and you just stuck to that intuition. And yeah, I mean, 2019 versus 2020 in terms of what you're doing and the interest that brands have given you, I think is something we should actually unpeel a little bit because I think there's a lot to learn from it. So 2019, right, you're reaching out to brands. You're one of the few who's taken a lead role in getting the BIPoC events out there and sponsored, and the brand names, they just sort of they didn't see what you saw, or they just didn't have the budget, or there wasn't the interest, or all of the above?
I think all of the above. A lot of them didn't see what I saw. And I think a lot of times people get so used to doing things a certain way that when you bring somebody in that kind of tries to shake up the system, they're like, whoa, what do I do with this? Right. So I think a lot of brands just like didn't want to. And nobody in Canada, living in the US for 10 years and then moving to Canada, one thing I have to say is in Canada, we don't really talk about race and racism. Yeah, oh, we do in a very polite way. And I would say like the polite way isn't great because it's oftentimes, we look to the US and be like, oh, the US, they have a lot of racial issue. Us in Canada, we don't have that. So I think for a lot of brands that I was reaching out in Canada, didn't really see racism in the outdoor as a thing. I would say that 4 years ago when I started this, I can open up any Instagram of any brand. There wouldn't be that people of color on it. There wouldn't be a Black person. Right now, it's trending. Now, you open, you see a lot of Black people, you see a lot of different BIPoC community, Indigenous communities, and then you're like, okay, now people are pushing it heavy on social media. Even like when I came into speaking out about diversity and inclusion, I called out a few major Canadian brands on social media because for me, it was like, I'm doing hiking, I'm doing snowshoeing, I'm doing all these things. But when I go into your store to purchase something, there's a lack of representation in your marketing. Like it's all white families enjoying camping, it's all white people who are skiing. And I'm like, well, I love these things and I'm so interested in these things. Why am I not represented in that marketing? Yeah, so a lot of brands, they were just like, they just didn't want to touch it. And I don't know if like they're afraid of the backlash. One company did, ended up working with them for 2 years, an ambassador, and that was a really shitty experience because it became very tokenistic. It became where my blackness was being used to kind of steer conversation about diversity and inclusion. But behind the scene, there was nothing being done in terms of what that looks like. I was running Color the Trails. There was no support for Color the Trails from this brand. As an ambassador, I was like, I wanted to try different sport. There was no financial support for me to get into those sports. For example, I wanted to learn to ski, and I was like, I'm so fascinated by it. Help me pay for the lessons. They refused. And then I went out, sought out ski lesson on my own, and I became pretty good at it, and I loved it. And then they kind of reached back. They're like, write us a blog about your experience skiing. And I was like, no, so you had nothing to do with me learning to ski because I had already asked you and you said no.
Mm.
Yeah. And for me, it's like, I'm glad that a lot of brands are interested in having this conversation about diversity and equity. But then my issue is, how do you avoid it to make it tokenistic? Because like right now, it seems like, if you have a Black person or BIPoC, you're trendy, you're cool. And I think that's what a lot of brands are not kind of trying to merge towards. Yeah. So then that's what I'm kind of like worried about. Like, how do you do that?
Right, the performative allyship is the big risk, and I think it's probably a super awkward stage where there's a lot of toggling between that for all of us who, every day make decisions big and small. What are some ways that we can be better, avoid performative allyship, and really make sincere and real changes in the outdoor and adventure fields to break down the stereotypes, support more diversity, accountability, obviously?
Yeah. One thing I think is if you're going to work, or if you're in a position of power, have resource or whatever it is that you have, and you want to work with the BIPoC community, find an organization that is BIPoC led, BIPoC owned or started, and don't go in with all assuming you have all the answer. I would say just go in and listen. And I think that's the same thing something that I think is really important that I've learned in my international development is the importance of listening to communities that you're trying to partner with, communities that you're trying to, support. Because if you're not listening, you're going to miss a huge chunk of what it is to work together and find, meaningful solution. Because you don't want to come in as a white savior and be like, we have all this money, we're just coming to give it to you. And money may not be what they need. It might be a different kind of thing. So I think if anything, always listening to the community that you're part of and never assume that you know better than they do because they know the best what they need. And not just like, for me, one thing I've noticed is like a lot of brands sometimes like cling on to one person and that person becomes a voice for all BIPoC, right? But like work with different community organizations. So like, if you're working with an organization like Color the Trails, then figure out, okay, what else is missing? LGBTQ plus community. There's groups that's designated to make sure, that community is safe in the outdoors. There's different groups, like all these different opportunities. And then, yeah, listening to their voice and committing, forming a relationship and commitment. Anybody that works with me, I say I'm not interested in a one-time like sponsored post or one-time event. I'm like, if you're gonna work with Color the Trails, I need partnership. I need us to be working on this for the next at least 5 years so that we both can see the direct result of it. Because when you just come and give funding for like an event and then peace out, well, that's not sustainable. That's not really helping the community move forward. And I'm not interested in that. And I tell a lot of people, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in partnership. How do we work together as partners to make the outdoors more accessible? And for a lot of brands that entail whether it's helping us start our gear library, where they're giving us, a lot of their demo items that we can help some BIPoC rent out, or it's us creating a series of events per year, 3 or 4 events that they sponsor. And one of that event, it would entail them also coming into the space because mostly we keep the event to BIPoC individual, and there's some events that's open to everybody. Invite them into that space. That way they get to meet the community that they're working with. And it doesn't just stop with gear. It's like, okay, so you guys are hiring. How are you diversifying your hiring process? Send us job description at Color the Trails. We'll put it up because there's a lot of talented individual who may not know that there's work opportunity in the outdoor industry, who have communication degree, who have all these degrees, that they can do the job, but just don't know that they have opportunity there. So send us those job posting and we can share with our members. So that's how I'm kind of like seeing how organization or individuals can really be involved in terms of avoiding performative allyship, but rather like forming, relationship, authentic relationship. Because once people understand that you're in it for a long time, they have way much respect for you. The trust is there. But I can sense when somebody's being flaky and somebody's just like doing it for publicity. And for me, I just don't take part in that. And because I don't like to be bullied or I don't like to just do something just because out of generosity, a lot of people find me difficult to work with. And I'm okay with that because it's not difficulty. I have a standard. And if you don't meet that standard, I'm sorry, you can't work with me. And it's because of self-respect and understanding that in the past my blackness has been used to try to sell something and has been profited in, but I want to control over that because before I didn't feel like I had a voice. I could, but now I feel like I'm in a position where I can say no, and understanding that is really, really important.
Mhm. So can you sense pretty quickly when someone's intention is to check a box?
Yes, I can sense it from out. Like, I can have a conversation and then be like, ooh, like this is not gonna go well. And I always end up giving people benefit of the doubt, even if, my intuition is just saying it's not gonna work, but I still try and try to work with that individual. If it doesn't work, then that's fine. I've been caught very difficult in emails, like, trying to organize an event where it was 100% marketing. It had nothing to do with bringing BIPoC out. It was more of like, it felt almost as like, oh, we're coming in like doing a huge favor to your organization by providing them this opportunity. And when I said no and I began to set boundaries, I got an email saying you're very difficult to work with. Like, why can't you just agree? And I was like, okay, thank you. Now I know.
Because it wasn't aligning with your mission and that wasn't their narrative.
No, it was basically a marketing ploy. It was let's market and show ourselves being diverse, and with that, any, I would say, sustainable plan after.
Right. So you've really required the brands that you work with to have a long-term relationship. You said up to 5 years, right? That's long-term these days. And not just do sort of the one-off event, which I think is makes a complete makes sense completely, right? Gosh, I think that is the real pitfall, and I think it's really interesting how you're creating a structure and really determined that it's the system, right? The systems need to be in place in order for all the players to really think of this as not a box to check, but relationship building and a journey. A journey that, that never has an end, that is always about growth and listening and curiosity, and, we have to continue to not feel like we've arrived. I guess that's sort of.
Yes, exactly.
So 2020 was a much different year for you, and now you talked quite a bit about the hiking, but you've also referred to the skiing, and I know you're doing biking as well. So share with us some of the actual activities that you're doing now and what's on tap for this winter.
Yeah. So COVID made it very difficult to navigate how to bring community together safely, but we somehow managed. So we started the year, our kickoff with intro to mountain biking. And that was just like amazing. If you go on the Color the Trails Instagram, there's like a minute long clip that you can kind of see the joy of individuals who just loved it. Yeah, so we started each other mountain biking. It was a 1 day event. So we broke it off into two groups of 15-ish people. And we got lessons from a certified guide. And that was just a blast. At first I was like, I didn't think people would be interested in mountain biking because it's a very intimidating sport. But 32 people came. We had to put a cap at it just because of COVID restrictions. And everybody just had a blast. And everybody was just like, this is amazing. And out of that 32, because again, like I said, I don't want things to be just like a one time kind of experience. So I was like, okay, mountain biking is a fun thing. And we made a really good relationship with a local mountain biking guide, a woman named Jacqueline, who owns a business called Essential Cycle, where she guides and coaches and all that. So we formed a really great relationship. And she's just like, anything that you need, you can have. That was basically our relationship. We decided together it would be really great to create a mentorship program. So Color the Trails, let people know after the event, like if you're interested in pursuing mountain biking, we're going to create a mentorship program. Just let us know. And 9 women of color, around all 9 women came and they were like, yes, we want to continue. So we paired them up. We set out information to the community, and we had about 50 mentors kind of sign up with only like 9 mentee. We're like, whoa, we'll keep you guys on the list for next year. And then, yeah, we paired people up and they would go riding like once or twice a month or based on their own schedule. And the great thing about the mentorship program is people didn't have to buy a hike because we had a bike, because we had access to a bike. We had access to helmets and we had access to protective gear. And that was all through Essential Cycle. So I got, access to her business. So if people needed a bike, I would just meet them at her business, give them a bike, and then they'll go ride with the mentor and then bring it back and I put it away. So this is what we did all last year. So we have that mountain biking, and then we did intro to kayaking, which was a lot of fun. We're just trying to figure out how to make that more accessible. Working with the local kayaking company here to figure out how we can continue. If folks want to continue to do kayaking, they can continue. And then we did intro to climbing as well as canyoning in Squamish, and that was also a lot of fun. With climbing is a little bit more difficult because the gyms here are really expensive. So we're just, again, trying to work with other organizations to be able to provide passes, lessons, and stuff like that. So that's coming out fairly soon. And we're really excited about that. And of course, in 2019, when we can gather without mask and all that, we did a program called Color the Slopes, where folks can come and learn to ski and snowboard. And this was through Whistler Blackcomb. They have a program called Never Ever Days where you can learn to ski or snowboard, lesson, everything included for $25. So I got 20 members of Color the Trails in winter 2019 to go and learn to ski or snowboard. So for me, that's just like that. And we wanted to run Color the Slope this year, but because of COVID, and we also kind of have travel restrictions right now, we're waiting for that to be uplifted before we can do any winter. So we may not do winter this year, but I also use this opportunity to network, and hopefully next winter I'll be able to put that Color the Slope program into full. But we did that, but I also started a Color the Trails backcountry kind of program because I got into, downhill skiing, but then I was like fascinated by backcountry. I'm still learning. So yeah, I got 6 of us to go into the backcountry and learn how to, learn about snow science, avalanche safety, and all that with a pro skier here in Canada, she's just amazing, Christine Latzi. And she's just like really cool individual who just kind of took me under her wing, and she's just like providing her guiding. She's a certified guide. Her guiding service is when it comes to backcountry skiing. So there's all these different programs that are coming that we did last year, and we hope to implement this year. Of course, we're going to continue our mountain biking program because that's the most successful program. Hopefully, this year we can kind of move without much restriction. So we're going to do the hiking, the climbing, and kayaking, and hopefully a lot of people also asking to go camping. So we're kind of beginning to organize maybe a 2-night camping trip. Those ones are always fun and fun when I do take people. So
Yeah. It sounds like there's so much interest and, just a little bit of a bottleneck right now with the limitations, but maybe it's an opportunity to, like you said, network and, sort of plan. Do you find that the physical challenges and adventures change the way you approach other things in your life?
definitely. It makes you a better critical thinker. It makes you a better risk assessment individual. And because now there's some things that I can do without really thinking because I was like, the risk for me is no longer as high as it was before. So I feel like I'm feeling because of my ability, I feel like I now can take that risk. And then sometimes I can look at something and be like, I'm not comfortable enough to take that risk. And that's okay. And that's one thing mountain bike taught me. It's like it's okay to get off your bike and walk something if you're not comfortable, and then continue riding. And then the next time you come, you're going to be able to ride that area that you were not confident in. And I think it's really enlightened me, but also it's opened up a whole world because I think a lot of times we're so focused into whatever that we're at that we don't think that there's a world outside of whatever world that we've created, but all these adventure is exposing me to amazing world that we have, and also recognizing the wonderful planet that we live in, and what that planet offers us, and how I can become a better advocate to make sure that this planet is here for the next generation. And how do we do that and have that deep conversation? So being this adventurous, being out, it makes me now, like, when I go travel, once we can travel again, I'm like, oh, where can I go where I can mountain bike, or where can I go where I can ski?
Mhm.
Like that's now like my adventure. Alice before would probably be like, I'll spend more my time in urban setting, going shopping and all that. Now my mind shift has shifted. Now I'm like, okay, like, if I'm gonna go to even, crossing the border to Washington, okay, like there's all these mountain biking trails that we need to try out. We just bring our bike and our tent and we're fine. So there's just like these things. It just makes, I think, even vacationing a lot more fun because I might not have the financial mean to stay at a nice hotel and all that. But I was like, I have a tent, I have a sleeping bag, and I have a car. I can make my own adventure and still have a grand time and be able to access some things that most people won't be able to access. So for me, it's just like it's opening up a whole different way of living. And it's very different than I think what my family would have expected. And even I would have expected of myself looking back. But I'm very grateful to realize, wow, there's a different way of living, and all that. It's good for especially for my mental health. It's so important when I'm out in nature on the weekend. On Monday, when I have to do work, I'm able to concentrate a lot better. Whereas if I'm not in nature, I feel almost like anxiety. There's just so much stress that I carry. So,
That's such an important part of it.
yeah.
Is there one thing that you wish you knew before you started this venture?
Yeah. I wish I knew that this space was accessible to me when I was younger. I wish schools did a better job of really giving students opportunities like this, whether it's like hiking, outdoor wilderness adventure. I wish public school and education system did a better job. But at the same time, too, I'm very grateful that I've discovered it now rather than, 50 years from now. So
Yeah, right? I mean, you still have a great long life ahead of you. Is there any advice that you would give your younger self?
one thing I've realized the way my mom raised us is she instilled a lot of confidence in us in terms of being able to walk in a room if you're the only one doing something, just doing it so well. So for me, any advice is, if you're passionate about something or interested in something, just follow that intuition and be persistent. Just keep going, even if people around you think you're crazy, even if people are slamming doors. at your face, like honestly, just keep moving forward because you're just amazed where life takes you just by being that persistent, where opportunity presents itself.
Mhm.
If anything, any advice is just being confident. Like I wish in some aspect I was confident in trying all these things that I was curious about, but was too intimidated or felt like I didn't belong. But yeah, just like that confidence, persistent, and just it's okay to be different. And I think a lot of times we want to blend in with everybody else, but we miss out in being authentic selves. So if anything, I just continue to tell my younger self to be her authentic self and continue to tell myself now to be my authentic self and to say no. I think a lot of times, especially as women, we have a hard time saying no and creating that boundary and recognizing that I have a lot to offer and that my voice is important and taking ownership of that and being confident in that and not apologizing to be in this space or whatever space that we're in, just taking that ownership, I think that will be advice. There's a lot of advices, but if anything, just confidence and persistent.
Mhm. Oh, Judy, there's so many great takeaways from this conversation. I wanna let you go skiing, so I just wanna wrap up. But I really, in all sincerity, really appreciate all that you've shared, and, I'm really excited too for you, for Color the Trails scaling, as well as for the model that you've created, the sort of third path to be used by others in other sectors. I think it's something that people can look to you. I know being a first has its bumps and bruises, but I do think it's really exciting.
Thank you.
Yeah, so tell us, how can we find out more about Color the Trails? And I know you have some films coming up this year. So tell us how we can be part of the party.
First and foremost, I find like if you have Instagram, it's a great way to kind of follow us there because that's where we kind of community updated. Right now, we're working on our website, so I think we're launching it next week. Our developer has finally finalized everything, which we're excited for. So you're gonna find us colorthetrails.com. Last year, we started a film festival called Black Like Me Outdoor Edition. So it's a series of three different films that we're going to be series of film festival that we're going to do. This one is going to be Black Like Me Outdoor Edition for Black History Month, and then for Indigenous People Day, there's going to be Indigenous Like Me Outdoor Edition, and then in the fall. Because I think talking about body size in the outdoors is really important. So there's going to be one Fat Like Me Outdoor Edition where we showcase individuals with different body size in the outdoors, which I think is a really important conversation that we should be having. So you can find us on social media, Instagram, where we're going to make the announcement for the film festival. We have amazing lineup, and you can just stream that at home. And that's another way of really supporting Color the Trails is supporting these small initiatives that we do because that helps us raise funds so that we can subsidize outdoor activities. And then we have a short film that we're working with Red Bull Canada to kind of look at us in the backcountry, which is actually really, really cool. And we're just kind of working with the editors right now, editing it. So it's just a short little film. So that's what we have coming up. And plenty of more exciting things. Just I would say Instagram or Facebook.
And just a note to our listeners in the US, Color the Trails, throw a U in there, right? Yes. Yeah, so it's Color the Trails, COLOUR.
Yes, yes.
Oh gosh, Judy, thank you so much. Have an awesome day skiing. Really appreciate all that you've shared and can't wait to see what happens.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the When Women Fly podcast. My hope is that you leave this conversation with a sense of curiosity and empowerment to hold on to what is important and let go to what weighs you down. Stare fear in the face. If you liked this episode of the When Women Fly podcast, be sure to share and subscribe and let us know what you think. We love feedback. Be brave, be bold, and fly. See you next time.